Well, hello everyone. Captain Kyle here, and welcome to the end game. And we have Robert. There we go. Come on back in. Oh, we got the
Well,
white wall.
Brick again.
I got the wall back.
We got the white wall. All right. So we'll do the same thing we did last time. We'll just all go to things, so it's like not me, just the only one here on the video, and we'll just keep it at that, right? So it'll be good. All right. So everyone, this is how life goes. You just have to roll with it and just allow it not to get under your skin, because so many things just don't work out the way you want them to. And when we do this live, this is why we do it live, because it'd be so easy to record things and then to edit them and then put it, but that's not the best thing, in my opinion, is to do it live and to have it real and not edited and made into something that it didn't actually happen the way it happened. And so with that, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get started. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. Lord, we thank you for all of your blessings and all of our challenges, and that we can look at them and smile and go, thank you, Lord, that we are blessed, and that it is a wonderful, wonderful time to be alive in all that we're going through, everything that is happening, and that we can see you operating in absolutely everything. And we thank you for allowing us to participate in your plan to save this world and humanity as it is. Father, we thank you. We know you don't need us for anything, and that you're allowing us to participate. Thank you for that. And we appreciate everything and every opportunity that we get to be a mouthpiece, an example, and a light in the darkness for your glory in all things. Lord, we pray for our military. We pray for President Trump and all of his cabinet, those people that are around him, those that are performing your will, that are seen, unseen in all areas. The mother that's in the basement that's praying, and she is a prayer warrior, because she's doing exactly what you have for her. And that's all that matters. No one is greater than the other. And Father, we thank you, we praise you, and we call on Jesus right now to be our light in this darkness, to shine the way that we're looking for. And Father, we thank you for it, and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So, how you been, Robert? How you been, Kelly?
Man,
I've been
I've
awesome.
been good. I've been busy. I've been traveling. I just got back to Maryland yesterday. So, it's
Yeah.
my first day back.
Yeah, so you've been all over the place. And so, did we get the petition put in for Texas?
The petition is put in for
Yeah.
Texas. I have to do some follow-up stuff, and where remember these aren't charted waters. You're basically, trial and error, trying to figure out how this goes or how it works. Um, what we have concluded is that is we are extremely certain that we are in the proper jurisdiction in San Antonio. We understand why that's the jurisdiction, and we get that part. Um, and it is the Republic of Texas that's going to have to come off the line first to start setting up the rest of the state republics. Um, so that's going to happen sequentially. Um, we are moving operations probably within a week. We are moving back to Florida, so we're going to be running everything out of Florida because it's really going to be. We're calling it the Texas Flora Alliance. That's going to have to come together first. Um, and then from that part, it should piece out the other republics as far as the state territories go. Um, at least the way everything is lining up to move forward, as we see it. We could be wrong, but everything appears to be headed that direction.
Well, that's okay, because what we've talked about many, many times is that from the bottom of where it's actually been worked from this area, it's all been trial and error, as you said before, right? We've
Right.
had to kind of figure out, muddle our way through so many different avenues, different things, discoveries, and figuring out just how to begin to operate in that jurisdictional playing field that has been so um, hidden as well as dormant for a
Right.
long time. And so, just by putting your feet in the water and breaking the surface and being able to, you know, begin ripples in that body of water, so to speak, right?
Correct.
Allows it to begin to operate from the other direction and could meet us at any given time and basically start to just run crazy with it, right? Because the groundwork is kind of established, even though it's not completed.
Yeah, it's and that's a great way of talking about it, and that's a great way of looking at it. Something to be mindful of. Like, so when I left San Antone, I went to New Orleans. I was in New Orleans a couple days, and I ended up taking the Amtrak train. Interesting, the Amtrak has a new line that is called the Mardi Gras line. I don't know if you saw any pictures. Um,
Yeah,
Over to
yeah,
Mobile,
I did.
Alabama.
Yeah,
So, so what I found there was very interesting. Apparently, Mobile, Alabama, is where the first Mardi Gras was, and you know that they designate a king and queen for Mardi Gras every year. Every year when they
correct.
renew Mardi Gras, it's a king and a queen. But the story behind Mardi Gras is actually religious. It's actually Islamic, religious. Okay, about Persian warriors that walked the streets and then went to the steps of the church and had a party on the Mardi Gras park.
And that was to celebrate the Persian warriors that fought in the battles with us, right?
That may have been what it was.
I mean,
Uh,
initially.
Initially what they thought that it meant, but inherently it was the Persian warriors taking ground inside
Yeah, no,
America.
I get how it changed, but I mean,
Right,
initially how it was, because it's always presented one way, but it's always got something else, and
right.
that's how they operated in everything
That's how,
to
yeah,
begin to
about
take
everything.
over from, like we've said many times, the 1812, that war never really ended,
Correct.
and it went underground and subversive.
Correct. And the other thing to think about, and we have to start thinking about this stuff, like there's a lot of I got a message from someone. There's apparently a Texas something task force that has been protesting because they're trying to move the Alamo into under Islam or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. But they've been doing They have an event coming up June 22nd at the Alamo to dispute the transfer of the Alamo to Islam or something like that, or some kind of Islamic linked organization. And of course, we're putting in a petition to have it moved to the Department of Interior, which would negate all of that and put it back where it
Correct.
belongs. So we're not saying we don't want it moved. We're saying we want it moved away from the state, away from the federal government, away from any NGOs, back into the Department of Interior.
And
So
the
where it
thing with
belongs.
that is that even who was it today, Kelly, that y'all posted that is laying out the groundwork that the NGOs are the ones that need to begin to become prosecuted.
Yes, it's the
Yeah.
NGOs, which are foreign American organizations,
Yes,
because we
but
have a
Kelly
foreign
posted.
jurisdiction.
Yeah, but
Oh, go
Kelly
ahead. Go ahead.
posted
Go ahead.
somebody today that laid out a pretty good. Um,
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now, and then I will forward it back so everybody can see it again.
And people need to remember when we started. we came in, we organized under a trade treaty, right? We were technically an NGO when we organized under the trade treaty.
Right.
It wasn't until we got a a order that put us on North America that we dissolved all of our trade treaty connection and all of our NGO stuff and got rid of all that. We used it to get in because that was the only way we could figure out how to get in. But once we didn't need it anymore, we dumped all of it.
Right. And, I've talked to Kelly about that many times, that you have to use the systems that are in place, just like Donald Trump used the system of the Republican Party to actually
Right.
get elected, even though that, there's just as many Republicans as Democrats that are corrupt and the system, but it aligns closer to the overall goals if done correctly. You've got to operate within that system so that you can move forward and then change it from within.
Well, inherently, yes, that's exactly correct. Just like, me getting a Bachelor of Laws from the University of London and my International Bar Association, which wasn't even recognized by the federal government until what, a year ago, when
Right.
when they got rid of the Department of Education and they moved all the teachers and all the nurses out, and they actually recognized my degree as a professional degree. But it wasn't recognized as a professional degree until then. Now it is.
Yeah, so Captain, that was Matt Walsh laying
Yes.
that out. Yeah, so I just reposted that for everyone in case they missed it.
And he makes a really good argument and on the corruption that's taking place and how the NGOs are being used to operate outside the government, but to facilitate the color revolutions within the government and to take them over.
Right. And that's how they're built, because while they are foreign, they're considered um religious, or that I don't want to say that it's hard. Religious is such a bad term to write to like uh uh to identify them, because organized religion has really convoluted everything the way that we think of it. When we say religion and we're using the word religion, we're talking about a superior organization above government that's private. And that's really what we're talking about. These NGOs are foreign private organizations, but they're operating on a plane. If you were to have a plenary council, a plane of religion, but it's a plane. It's a jurisdictional plane that they're operating in, which is why they've become so powerful.
Yeah, and
Um,
almost accountable to nobody.
well, fairly, pretty much, yes, because there were actually no courts actually in the private sector, that because it's the international courts that are the ones that are supposed to hold these trials. Well, there were no actual mechanisms of law or courts. It was literally the Wild West.
Yeah.
So, and what we've done is we've introduced not only a mechanism of law, a standard of law and equity, uh, uh, in jurisprudence into the system, into the private sector, but we came out of the NGO side, and it also has now been established as a North American organization in an American religious establishment, which puts it into a higher plane in that private sector.
Right. And so, it encourages me right now because I can see how specific doors are being opened and specific doors are being closed, but how also that certain areas are being directed in certain directions,
Right.
um, for the public, because this is more the public having to see and experience certain things so that they understand why certain changes have to take place.
Right. and a lot of them have to do with timing. Like I was saying about going over to Alabama, that Mardi Gras line, that line's 9 months old, which means they have not. 9 months ago, you could not have taken that line to where the original Mardi Gras was, and that's not the only thing that's over there. The Creek Indian Museum is over there, and there's a lot of stuff that has to do with the space shuttle and stuff like that that's over there. And that's also where they parked the USNS Mercy, and the USS United States is parked in Mobile Bay, Mobile Harbor. So they moved that was in Philly, and they moved it to there.
Yeah, Huntsville's theirs too, which is, in that area, which is significant to discovery, technology, and future stuff that's coming out that people are going to just be blown freaking away by.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot that went down in that upper Gulf Coast part of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, in that Pensacola area. That West Florida, Western Panhandle, Pensacola area. There's a big significance about where things are stored or where they're originated or how they did this stuff over there.
Right. So where are you right now, as far as in the process of, I guess, you're transitioning back into Florida, and how are you guys, and this is for the public to, kind of understand, what are you doing right now in that Florida, Texas kind of whatever? You can,
Alliance.
yeah, I
Alliance.
mean, you can explain it better than I can.
Yeah.
I'm just
So
trying to bring forth the question so that you can, de- de- delve deeper into an explanation of understanding why these two states are very fundamental in the groundwork that's being laid here.
well, a lot of people don't know about the Republic of West Florida that was established in 1810. That was only technically, but in 1819, the Treaty of Cessions basically made Florida a kingdom nation state. Okay, so and that's our originating documents are there really under the Treaty of Cessions, because we took the position that the War of 1812 has never ended. And that's right on the Spirit of Baltimore banners. So we're not the only ones that say it. The Spirit of Baltimore that travels up and down the coast says it too. So based on that, Texas is the only state or only previous republic in the Western Hemisphere that we know of that still has an active, recognized archive
Yes.
and an actual archivist that can act as a recorder, an official recorder for a court of record and archivist, which is the Daughters of the Republic of Texas
And have you
organization.
guys reached out to them and gotten any
I
response, or?
I have been on the phone with one of them that actually has been following me, and she reached out to me, and we've had numerous conversations. She is handling her side of her organization as far as who to get in contact with to try and get things coordinated on that end. So she's operating there, and we're working out sending her documents so she knows what to bring them and try to make those connections. Because really, we need each other, right?
Oh,
They don't
yes.
have, it's the same problem with the equity court. The equity court that we have has been around since 1976. 50 years. 50 years that court has been sitting in Alberta, and they have not had an administrator for 50 years because nobody had put together an organization that could qualify to act as their administrator. So it's not until they came across us and we got together that we were qualified to be a court administrator and they were qualified to act as an heir equity court. And we have both of them together. So that's how this stuff works. This is why contracting alliances is so important. You have to come together and contribute your capacities, what you offer, to the other side so that you can sponsor each other to move forward. So, and that's the same thing with this. They have an official archive, they have the authority to administer an archive, and they have the capacity to act as a court of record or as a recorder and actually for official records. That's recognized by the federal government and it's recognized by the United States. We need one of those. So it behooves us both. The other side of that is that we're working to get them put back in charge of the Alamo the way they were before it was taken from them, and get the other asset or holdings that they had that the state government took away from them and locked up. So it's a mutual. They need us, but we need them too. They do things that we don't do that we need. We need to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, a lot happened in the meeting that was more symbolic as well as transitional between President Trump and the king.
King Charles.
Yes.
I agree with you. I don't think it was symbolic. I think it was. I think. Well, no, I take that back. It was symbolic. You're absolutely correct. But I think it was far more than anybody really understands, as far as the granting of, or the exchange, or the mutual renewing those relationships for the better of both parties.
But it was a change of that relationship, 100%.
Well, I think it was but
yeah, because when you look at the issuing of that change of granting him and giving him the bell, that bell significantly is a ringing of the bell, which is a changing of the guard, which is a changing of our state
to a
100%.
nation. To a
Yes,
nation.
that's what I'm talking
We were
about.
recognized as a nation of people.
Yes, our sovereignty. It's going from
Yes.
maritime back to the law of the land.
Right.
And that was being represented by two kings. That's why he actually said that very thing, as the picture that was with him and King Charles, that's significant on that representation of going from that system and into a new system from maritime back to sovereignty and law of the land.
Well, that's true, but I want to elaborate further on that. A lot of people don't realize that the actual Admiralty Court the Court of Admiralty is actually in London.
Oh yes,
which means if Maritime's been running everything, then even the Court of Admiralty has not been functioning correctly. Which means that them coming together the way they did may have also reactivated the English Admiralty Court
for actual Admiralty law.
For actual Admiralty law, which is Coast Guard and Marine Corps together. And I just put a clip up because someone notified me that they announced that in Guantanamo Bay, the Coast Guard and Marines have opened a sea base down in Guam, or in Cuba.
Yes.
Right. So now they have a sea base. Now I was talking about sea bases 5 months ago, 3 months ago. I was talking
Yes.
about sea bases down in Key West, and that's where they're locked at, and that's the only place you'll find the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard together is on a sea base. You need a sea base to get admiralty. Now they're saying that there's an admiralty in Cuba, right? And now King Charles is here, and that's where the original admiralty
And
is
so
funded.
this is another issue
Wow.
that we were having with what they did is they put the Coast Guard under Homeland Security, and basically under
And
Homeland
Congress.
Security, that was a part of it not being funded, right?
Yep.
And so on and so forth. But the thing with that is that when we are actually at war, the Coast Guard falls under the Navy.
I believe the Coast Guard does fall under the Navy,
It
except
does when
for
we're at war.
matters of admiralty in the Navy. The Coast
Yeah,
Guard still
I'm not
runs.
sure about that. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But I do know that it does. They operate as the Coast Guard falls under the Navy's jurisdiction whenever we are at war, and we have been at war for ever, and basically since we went under continuity of government back in 2017, and the Coast Guard has been operating on and in naval jurisdiction. That's why you've seen the Coast Guard, all over places that are not a part of our coastal waters,
Right, right. But
because
when
they're
the Navy and
operating in naval
so
jurisdiction.
my understanding is when the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps are together, they are actually at admiralty. That's how you get to admiralty.
Yeah, and I
Putting
agree
them
with that
together.
100%, because you've got to take and also there's another thing that's going on right now with actually taking the Marines off of the ships and taking them and housing them on the base.
As they should be. As they should be.
And I don't remember. Kelly, Google that real quick for me.
But
I know
that
that.
goes back to what I had said before, where the Marines were not supposed to be with the Navy. That was a whole
Oh, yes, I
Reconstruction
agree.
thing.
Captain,
That
I
was a
was
whole Reconstruction thing that happened after the Civil War.
Yes,
Captain,
Kelly.
I was answering somebody's question in Rumble. What did you want me to Google?
About the Marines being housed off of the ships and onto barracks on shore.
I just saw a thing on that they're calling it
Yeah,
Barrack
they're in the process
2030 or
of doing
something.
it, right?
They're
Yeah, they're in the
rebuilding like
process
all
of
the
doing
barracks
They're,
and stuff. For the
they're
Marines.
being housed where?
on barracks, not on ships. Like when the ships are in port, they're not on the ships anymore. They're supposed to be starting to take them and put them in barracks on the
Okay.
shore, on land.
I never knew that they were living on the ships in port. I had
Yes.
no idea. I had
Yep.
no idea. It never even crossed my mind.
Yeah,
I
and
thought
this is something that they're having to rebuild these barracks and rebuild them because they don't have the housing for them, because they have always been on the ships.
right.
Okay, it says,
Because
yes, the vast majority of the U.S. Marines are housed in barracks, unaccompanied housing on Marine Corps bases, not on ships, while they are stationed in garrison at their permanent duty station. As of May 2026, the Marine Corps is heavily engaged in Barracks 2030, a major long term, multi year project to overhaul and improve onshore housing facilities. And then it just goes into different key facts in it. And there's also something called Operation Clean Sweep. In early 26, the Corps continued its massive effort to fix it and not forget it. On ship housing, Marines only live on ship afloat when they are deployed with a Marine Expeditionary Unit MEU or during
Mew, yeah.
specific at sea training exercises.
Yeah, so the Marine Expeditionary Unit basically is like the MEU that we have over there right now. We have two actual MEUs over there in um, the Middle East area, right? And that's the man, they're ready to go at any given time, and they're not playing around. And so this is the whole thing, though, is getting them off the ships and back onto shore where the Marine Corps is supposed to be.
Right.
Um, because the Marines are a land division that was transferred into the Navy.
Right. And it was transferred in the Navy specifically to allow the Navy to operate at sea, giving them the capacity of what the Coast Guard's supposed to have at Treasury.
Yeah. So this is
So
all being, so you can see what we're talking about here, that things are starting to come up, the things that we're talking about that are beginning to get changed or in the processes of being changed publicly, not necessarily as it happened already behind the scenes, because a lot of things are already done behind the scenes, but are just being shown to the public in the correct timing so it can go through the processes. Um, but that's, it's amazing that the things that we've talked about over the last year are coming to fruition right
yeah.
now as we speak.
And when we said them a year ago, there was nothing on the line about this is going to happen.
No, like
Nothing.
taking the field and everything else, right?
Right.
And they're coming ashore.
Right. So it's yeah, it's and you know what? This whole Spirit Airline thing, I have a feeling Spirit
That's
Airlines,
fucking awesome, isn't it?
I have a feeling that there is a
Newport
connection between
Airlines.
Spirit Airlines and it was like a gateway for FAA or something. There was something to do with the FAA and Congress's chokehold on the airline industry, and it was going through Spirit Airlines.
Yeah, and it was funny because Trump, or I think it was Trump, that said, "Yeah, we need to buy Spirit Airlines and turn it into Deport Airlines." Did you know
Deport.
that?
No,
Yes, I'm not kidding.
that's funny.
I'm
That's
not
funny.
kidding at all. That's why I said Deport Airlines when as soon as you said that.
Well, maybe it has a continental capacity that we don't know about. Maybe there's something about them. There's a significance, and it was funny because it's been popping up on my TikTok. I was looking at it earlier, and I looked at the last three flights that landed in Dallas Fort Worth. Those were the last three flights, and I was like, I wonder what the last three flights were, where they came from, and where they went to. They went to Dallas Fort Worth, which I thought was interesting, and they came from Detroit, Chicago, and Fort Lauderdale. Now, Fort Lauderdale is east of the Everglades. So, like Everglades National Park, all that stuff,
Yeah,
that's Fort Lauderdale. That's right there.
yeah, I know. I've been there many
Okay.
times. Yeah,
So, but Chicago, we have already figured out that they moved after the 1862 Railway Act. They moved the central hub of basically the United States to Chicago. The railroad companies did. All that land, all those land titles they got were coming through Chicago. That's why Chicago was such a hub. And we already
yeah. And
know
that's
that
where all of the
Detroit was
corruption
Motor
and
City USA.
yeah,
That was like motor car production. Like that there's a big significance about Michigan and Detroit and Pontiac and all that other stuff that goes through there.
yeah, and
And
that
I
was
think that
big
has to
for
do
the corruption
with the freight
and the
boats.
mafia and everything else.
Yeah, because I just spent a week in Michigan, and I was talking to them there, and we were talking. And I said, whatever's going on, whatever shut down Detroit, whatever happened, whatever shut down the Pittsburgh steel mills, I don't think it had to do with the steel mills being underbidded by foreign companies. I think it had to do with losing access to the mines that were bringing in the iron ore to make steel.
It was part of it because a lot of the this was intentional because we've got many mines that are in like Nevada, Arizona, and I'm talking worth trillions of dollars worth, really seriously. But they turned them into national parks and made them off limits to being able to be mined.
Right.
The same thing with what they did to the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is not what everybody thinks it is.
I think it's a mine.
Well, it's not necessarily a mine, but it has it has things in it that will completely contradict our history of the United States being what it was written. And so it is completely off freaking limits. Many parts of the Grand Canyon you are not allowed to go to, period, at all.
Really. Well,
Oh yeah,
I'm
if you show
I,
up in
I
it,
believe
it's like
that.
you're going to prison. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I believe that. I believe that there are there are a lot of things with the way that our history is degraded. There are a lot of things that are going to have to be either rewritten or they're going to have to be clarified. And I think a lot of them have to do with these dormant jurisdictions and the way the history books were written to program the masses to create a a a quasi voluntary workforce, because that's really what
Well,
the public education system is. It's to
yeah, that's
produce
all it.
a
Yeah, that's
submissive
all it
workforce.
was. Yeah, that's all it
That's all
was.
it's for.
Yeah, because it's not about being educated; it's about being
Nope.
dumbed down and just not asking questions and basically becoming a good worker and following line. Blah blah blah. Um, but they've completely rewritten our history, our where did Tartaria actually disappear to? It's all over maps. They knew about Antarctica before it was discovered. I mean, all of these things they tried to hide, but whenever everything went online and you had the ability to search out where you didn't have to just go to specific libraries or whatever to find information, all this stuff started to pop up, and they tried their best to subdue it, but too many people found things and then saved them and then put them back out to where once that cat's out of the bag, it's really hard to put it back in the bag. And there's a lot of cities and um, cultures in the Americas that do not line up at all, zero, with history, the way it was formally taught by the education system. Completely, absolutely wrong. And so,
Right.
what we're going to find is that when we start going back through and having to re educate, almost all of our history books, our um, education system is going to have to be rewritten and corrected because from what I understand, and was told to me in a spiritual situation, spiritual setting, that in a higher realm, just put it that way, that 90% of our education information is incorrect.
I agree with that. You know,
90%.
no, I listen. I totally agree with that. I've been walking around I'm walking around the only person that I know who walks around telling people like, you guys understand the United States is the Western Hemisphere, right? When you say United States, you're talking about 36, 35 American states in the Western Hemisphere. That is the United States. The 50 states that we think of as the United States is actually a separate American state called the United States of America, which is an American state and a member of the Organization of American States
Yeah,
inside the United States, which
and
is the
that
Western
was
Hemisphere.
yes. And so when um, Pete Hegseth basically said that we are realigning whatever the northern hemisphere or the western hemisphere
Right.
strategy or whatever, I can't remember right now,
Yeah.
but it's following that definition
Correct.
of the United States.
Correct. Which is the Americas. Which is
Correct.
the Americas. Now here's what's scary. Which is the Americas that was initially declared independent by the people of Texas from Spain. So
Yeah.
when Texas was its own country. So
Yes. And
so
so
it's
that's why it
Texas.
was so important that the Don Road Doctrine was introduced when it was, and it was all of the Americas
Correct. Which is the
to
northern,
redefine
right.
that for the people to understand that it was all of the Americas.
Correct. Which is the Organization of American States. Which means,
Yes.
and this is where we got into the whole talk about Venezuela, and we're like, it's not war. When you have conflict within your borders, you call that law enforcement. It's law enforcement. It's American law enforcement to go to Venezuela. Congress has no say.
And right now, whether people realize it or not, very shortly we are going to take back Cuba
Yep.
and free it from the oppressor.
Yep. We're going to take back Cuba. We have to take back Cuba. We have to take back Greenland, and we have to take back the Falkland Islands for Argentina.
Yes, and that is something that they Argentina is not going to do on its own
They
because
tried to do it,
I know, but yeah, but it's a mess.
and that may be why the king is over here, because part of that is to transfer the Falkland Islands back to Argentina and recognize Western hemispherical independence.
It may be. I mean, more because there's so much more to this than what just meets the eye, and there
Correct.
always is, especially in the timing of it, when basically we're collapsing NATO because NATO's a joke, and European nations and the whole Europe, the European crazy town is being exposed for exactly what it is, and that they've been riding on that three-tier function of the British imperial system, which is the Vatican, London, and DC.
Well, don't
London was the
forget
money.
Spain. Don't
Yeah,
forget
but
Spain
London
and
was the money.
Portugal.
Yeah, but London was the money. They controlled everything financially, and that's everything. They controlled it all by finances. United States was the military enforcer, and the Vatican was the Roman Empire that never fell.
Well, I think the Vatican. I think we go one step further. The Vatican was the church for
Yes,
the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire that never fell was Spain and Portugal.
well, I don't know about that. So I don't know about that. I do know the
Well,
other part of it though. So
this
I
is what
can't
I can.
speak to
This is
what
what
I
I
don't
can
know
say.
about.
I just finished a book, and in that book, it specifically elaborated on 1492 and Columbus's commission by the Spanish monarchy to sail west and find a western route and all that happened. And it actually elaborated on in 1493, Pope Alexander declared the Western Hemisphere under Spain as Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. And the Western Hemispherical Americas was Spanish, declared by the Pope.
Yeah, no, I'm not necessarily
But
doubting that,
but
but
it
I'm
goes
just
back to
talking about when it goes.
1493.
Yeah, that may be true, but I'm just talking in the three state functionality of the control of the world has been the church, which has been the spiritual aspect of Rome, which is the Roman Catholic Rome,
Right.
because they never fell. It just
Right.
moved into freaking behind the Vatican walls and controlled everything from the spiritual side of it. And then London basically was the financial hub, the city state of London, and the city state of Washington, D.C., which was the military industrial complex that was the forcer of all of these policies worldwide.
Well,
Because
and
that's what they did.
well, that's exactly what they did. And
And
as Americans, they used our competitiveness
well, we
to
were the
their
giant.
advantage.
We
Right.
were the giant that they controlled, that did all of the enforcement, right?
Right.
So we, but the sad thing about it is we financially paid for their enforcement of their policies.
Right.
And
Right.
this is what's
Right.
exposing them, because Donald Trump is pulling out of that military strong arm for them and exposing them for the inability to govern their own self in a position of military strength. They're
Right.
all vulnerable, every single one of them now.
Right. Right. Because they've been relying on a enforcer that's no longer there. I mean,
That we paid for.
you know, well, that's true. We did pay for it because we have the capacity to pay for it. We're the ones with the system set up that generates wealth like incomprehensibly, which is why, once they got control of us and we're willing to pay for it, like we'll not only do the work, we'll pay for it ourselves.
Hey, Kelly's got a video. Hey, Kelly, do you want to play that video?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why don't you play that video? And this is something that we were talking about a minute ago about the transferring of sovereignty from maritime over to sovereignty back to the land and so on and so forth. This lady, she puts this together pretty good in the recognition of the significance of the gift that one king gave to another king. And I don't care if you like it or not, Trump is a king.
That's
And
jurisdiction.
and the situation with that is he's been formally recognized as royalty in every country that he's gone to, plain and simple. And so in that,
You should be
this is
proud.
very
You should be
significant.
proud that your president is showing up in other countries and they are recognizing him as royalty, as the representative of your nation. You should be proud of that. That means they're recognizing your nation as a kingdom.
And sovereign.
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
so here,
here
go
we
ahead and
go.
play that. Yeah, make it full screen.
Let me see. Is that from the beginning?
No, so you need to like select it, make it bigger.
All right, let me. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to the beginning when I put it up. Here, let me try something else. Let me close out Telegram and bring it back up. Darn. There is a difference inside of me, more than a feeling.
Select the video, Kelly, so it's full screen.
Something really powerful is happening. I have nothing. Oh, wait, here we go. Here's the thing. All right. Sorry about that. I found how to get it back to the beginning. All right, here we go. There is a fresh wind, and I can hear this sound. Something truly wonderful. So let me pause it like as it's going because it's hard to read it that quickly. Okay, and I can read it actually for you. She says, "What does two kings and a golden bell gift from King Charles mean as it relates to Trump and America?" The beekeeper is finalizing the record. For over a century, the corporate maritime system has governed the land, but the two kings have appeared as living witnesses to signal the end of that era. Something truly wonderful is happening. The hush is over. We are moving from the corporate enslavement back to the sovereign law of the land. The Trump 1944 bell isn't just an artifact, it's a legal signal that the old record is closed. The 100-fold restoration isn't coming, it's already America's path. The District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871 is often identified in forensic circles as the movement the United States was transitioned from a sovereign republic into a private corporation. Admiralty law. This corporate system operates under maritime admiralty law, the law of the sea, rather than the law of the land. The siphon. This is the legal foundation for the siphoning you felt. It treats citizens as corporate assets rather than sovereign individuals. The dissolution. The document you shared states that the visible appearance of these high-level figures provide visible confirmation that this corporate system is being brought to its lawful end. The Trump 1944 bell, the bell serves as a legal and spiritual signal of this transition, ringing out the old. In the maritime tradition, bells are used to mark time and signal changes in watch. This bell signifies the final watch of the corporate system. 1944 significance. 1944 was a pivotal year in global history. The Bretton Woods Agreement, which established the modern global financial system. The Trump 1944 marker suggests a reset or correction of the financial and legal structures that were put in place during that era. The bell is the keystone signal that the list is being brought down and the law of the land is being restored. What's the list? The list typically refers to the Admiralty Law records and corporate maritime systems registry that has governed America as a corporation rather than a sovereign republic.
which was kept in London.
Yep.
The Trump 1944 bell acts as the keystone because it signals the official sign off on the end of that corporate record, restoring the record, as the two kings appear to finalize the legal witnesses. The list.
Oh, it's a closing bell.
Yes,
It's the
Yeah,
closing bell at the
yeah,
exchange.
yeah,
They
yeah,
ring the bell to close the exchange.
yeah.
they ring the bell to
It,
open it.
and they
Mm-hmm.
ring it's the closing bell.
That's correct. That's what we're talking about here. Keep
Yeah.
going, Kelly.
The list of corporate maritime claims is being dissolved so that the law of the land can be restored. The sevenfold completion. The Keystone Bell marks the completion of the national restoration from the 1871 corporation.
Interesting.
Okay, that was it. I thought that
So
was a
you
good
had a
one.
bell ring in your head, didn't you, Robert?
Well, I was thinking about because I just saw this thing where they were protesting at the stock exchange, and I was like, "Well, what does the bell? What does the bell indicate?" But they ring the bell on the end of the closing, closes the market. It
But
closes
it
the market.
but it opens. It's significant in many aspects of opening and closing,
Right.
and it's just like we're in maritime. It's like, okay, two bells, you know, three bells. They all are significant. It's just like whenever you go to um, Buds, they have the bell. You ring the bell, you're ringing out,
Right. You're checking. You're
checking
sounding the
yourself
bell.
out, right? You're
Right.
ringing out. So this bell is very significant in this transition of the end of an order.
And the beginning of a new marks a new time. A beginning of a new
Absolutely.
time. Yeah. It
Financially and
makes sense.
everything. Because Bretton Woods, when that opened in 44, right? Significance because in 71 it expired. 71, that's whenever they were going to basically just they were going to run us in the crazy town
They did.
financially. I know, but this is what kind of saved our butt, okay? Was that in 74, that's whenever they tied the dollar to the petrodollar through OPEC, OPEC's cartel. But that was still British, the British crown. The British crown ran OPEC. And it's very significant right now that the UAE just basically said we're out of the OPEC cartel as of May 1st. That is the breaking up of all of these institutions that have been out there as cartel
All
organizations,
oligarchical cartels. Yeah.
yes, being
Yeah.
ran by the British Crown, and because they were the puppet master behind it. Okay, they weren't necessarily the puppets or the what was doing it, but they were the behind the scenes, just like they were on Iran. That's what set up Israel through the Donbass agreement to start with, but then the Rothschilds gave that money, I mean that land over because see the Donbass agreement gave the British the ability to purchase land in that Palestine region. Okay. Once they purchased enough of the land, then they were able to gift that land over to the state of Israel to create Israel. So
Right.
they created Israel, the land, the state of, then they basically helped to create the terror proxy of Iran, the two entities that are supposed to bring forth the apocalyptic timeline that is within the Bible. They
Yeah.
created it.
Well, of course they did.
I know, but this is the significance of what's going on here right now is so much greater because it's all being exposed and brought down, and it's exposing the puppet master, the ones that are behind the curtain that have been pulling the strings, that have basically been causing all of this chaos throughout the world that we have just normalized.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And they did create it, and they fed it on both sides of the coin. And
Yes,
as long as they were feeding both sides of that coin, everyone was paying attention to that. They could go around on the backside and do whatever.
that's how they controlled the economies. That's how they made money. That's how they created wars. That's how they
Yep.
created all the chaos that they have continually created to bring us to where we're at now, that they were trying to manufacture the apocalyptic of revelations of the final
Yeah. Well,
battle in
they,
Iran.
they
I mean,
right.
with Israel. Because,
And
see, the difference between the Shiite and the Sunnis in their belief system is that they believe, which is Iran, they believe that they must manufacture the scenario of chaos and destruction so that their mom, which is their great leader that's in hiding, that's supposed to come out and basically they're supposed to manufacture this chaos to bring forth that final battle for the destruction of everything. Well, the like the other Muslim entities, they believe just the opposite, that they're not supposed to manufacture it. They're supposed to live as good human beings and under the law and so on and so forth. And if the chaos comes to bring forth that, then that is God doing it, and that they're not supposed to be manufacturing it, right? Well, the same thing in Israel. Well, if Israel basically started doing all their stuff where they've built for the red heifer and the slaughters again and all the shit that they were starting to put together, that's them also trying to manufacture that end time apocalyptic chaos to bring forth the final battle. That who is going to be right here? Is it going to be the Jew? Is it going to be the Christian? Is it going to be the Muslims? Who is it? But they don't give a shit, because who's manufacturing it are the elites that are serving Baphomet and the God of this world, which is not the creator of all things.
well,
They're the
that's true.
puppet masters.
I think what's happened is now I can tell you with our organization, we've taken we've taken the nonpartisan veteran role. The only two people in history that have gone out and started all these wars are the greedy wannabe kings for power, or the religious zealots to pound their religious ideology down everybody else's throats.
Yeah, they'll do the
So you know what?
crusades and everything else.
So you know what? You're both crazy. You're
Oh,
both out of your
absolutely.
mind. And
Yes, but
since
that's what it was
we're
designed to be.
and that's the position that we've taken, is we're American veteran, like we're American. This is American veteran sponsored organization. If you're in the organization, then you are considered intelligent enough to be able to be in this place and have a real conversation about this stuff. But we don't care anymore. We're not following the dipshit I want to be kings to give them power and authority, and we're not following the organized religious zealots either, because you've both been found crazy. You're out of your minds. We are
Well,
politically neutral.
the whole
Period.
thing with the kings is that they believe that they are the blue blood, so to speak. They basically are of alien origin, whether they
Right.
want to believe it or not, doesn't matter. And the crown, significantly, that's supposed to be worn by the kings, are that fundamental glow that comes from the top of the head, the crown chakra, which is that they believe they're above everyone else, and that everyone else is considered to be basically
Inferior.
peasants and dogs.
Inferior.
All
Right. They do believe
inferior.
that. The
And
problem
that's
is
the whole thing.
the
Is
problem
it's all
is
bullshit.
but the problem is, if you take that position, then you violated Jesus's teachings, because Jesus was a herited blood king who then changed the doctrine and said, if you follow my teachings, ye are both kings and priests. And you were to have a relationship
Spiritually,
with the Father in your closet, because that's where your relationship is, right?
yes,
So
because it
so
is a
you broke the rules.
spiritual
You broke
thing.
the rules. You broke the rules on number 1, because Jesus said, if you follow my teachings, you are both king and priest.
Right,
because
and
he
that's the
has the
thing is
power.
that
He had the
he was the
power to do
way
that.
shower.
That's right. That's right. So you broke the rules. So now you can't say I'm a heretical king and Christian. No, you're not. No, you're not, because that's not, because the true king freed all who follow him. It didn't matter who they were. It mattered how their performance about walking the right way. So so it ruins that. But
And it was
these
all about the spiritual development, period.
well,
And that the
and that's
kingdom
the
of
truth.
God dwelt within inside of you, and that would be revealed through your walk, period.
And that's why you can't pound. Someone said this to me a long time ago, and we were friends a long time ago, and he said, and it was true. He said, you can't pound your thoughts or ideas into another human being.
That's right.
That is absolutely true. People are in different intellectual and spiritual capacities, and they have their own road. You can give them advice, you can guide them, you can shepherd them, but you are not allowed to pound your ideas into them, and you are definitely not allowed to impose your concepts of what you believe is religious or Christian
That's a complete
onto them.
violation of free
That's
will.
called right, right. It's a complete violation of free will. It is a total violation of free will. So you've broke the natural rule.
Yes, because
Everybody
I
has to
talked to
walk
Kelly
their
the other
road.
day and was talking to her. What was it? I was talking to her about, you know, the difference between, natural law, spiritual law, and universal law.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And natural law, basically, God tries to operate in natural first, which is through people and things. Then, if that doesn't work, then he operates spiritually, meaning through prophets and through prophetic and speaking directly or giving people vision, so on and so forth. Those things, those are spiritual laws of operation. And then universal laws are the actual true laws that governs all things.
all things in the
All things,
universe. Universal
period.
laws, like in the universe, like the stars, the stars that mark the time and the seasons, like
There's
that
no
kind of
getting
thing.
out of the
There's no getting
changing of
away from it.
universal law. That's
Right.
the ultimate law of everything. And that's where, if this is why it's so important, like whenever I pray, I always pray that, you know, thank you for allowing us to participate in your plan, because it is his plan and doesn't need us. And we're participating through my own free will and trying to perform those things in which you want from me. And I'm grateful for that. And I recognize the importance of that. And, but he doesn't need me by no means. Doesn't need any of us to perform his actual will, because that's governed under universal law, period. He always operates, though, in the lowest law, which is our physical domain, then our spiritual domain, then into the universal law, which is going to make it happen no matter what. Period. There ain't no changing it.
Well, and you know what? That's a great example of how we should approach things. We don't start. We don't when someone transgresses us. We don't start by escalating to violence, right? We start by analyzing the situation, investigating the situation, making sure that our perception of reality is correct, right? And then we try to establish some sort of reparation or repair for the transgression, and then eventually, like, if depending on how big the situation is, it leads to violence, because because that's where it didn't originate at violence. It originated out of transgression that was just either recklessly disregarded, or it finally went over the line in the sand that person had established. And we really should approach things in a judicious, procedural manner when dealing in conflict, and that's how it should work. And unfortunately, We don't, because we are not trained correctly, and we're very bad at conflict management.
So this is something that I talked to Kelly about the other day, is that we have technology that is actually dangerous for the universe, everything and all things in it. But we, as individuals, people, haven't evolved spiritually enough to be able to truly manage and harness that kind of technology and that kind of power. And so we are actually dangerous, not only to ourselves, but to all that is out there. And that's why right now we're kind of being managed, whether people realize it or not. We are being managed by beings that are of a much greater spiritual evolution, and that when they look at us, we're like the wild little kids in the sandbox playing with toys that could blow up the entirety of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that I well, you know what, and I think this goes back to Moses coming down from Mount Zion with the sapphire tablets, and whatever was on them, he looked at what they did just in the what 40 days that he was gone, and he's like, no way, no way am I giving you this.
Y'all
Here,
went right back
he's
to being freaking
y'all.
nuts.
That's right. You all bunch of heathen demons.
Yeah,
Nope, no way.
yeah,
Smash those. We're going with 10 rules. When you figure out, then maybe we'll give you something else. No
yeah.
way. Absolutely not.
All right. Hey, Kelly, let's do a few questions and stuff, and then we'll wrap it up. We've had a great conversation here.
Okay, sounds good. Grab them. Where did the money come from when we were born? That is, and the birth certificates are used in the stock markets and bonds.
Oh, I can. You want me to answer this?
Yeah, you can go ahead and shoot
Okay.
it.
So the best that we can figure out, this is how the system works, and a lot of people don't really know. So what happens is when you are birthed, you're not born, you're birthed, right? Because you're coming out of water, which means you're coming out of a vessel,
To a doc,
um,
to a
to a
doctor,
doctor at the dock, right? There is a
manifest.
legal instrument that is originated. There's actually a couple of them.
Yeah,
Okay. So those instruments that get originated, one goes to your Office of Vital Statistics, one goes to the health department. Okay. And then one becomes a birth certificate, one becomes a certificate of birth. Okay. What happens is when they establish your social security account number, your social security account number, that account number is in the United States of America, and that account number basically attaches a a portion of the gold reserves in the United States of America. If you ever look at your birth or your Social Security card, the USA is actually in gold. It's got like this gold flake speckle on it that the USA is actually written in, telling you it's gold or it's backed in gold. Okay, so the
you're also
certificate.
at that point. You're also assigned a CISA number.
Not yet, not yet. We're going to get to the number. So what happens is the birth certificate attaches to the social security account, and the CISA number is generated when they
Correct.
come together.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, so now they're together because the state is the you have been put into a state orphanage, and the state is the warden, okay, of the orphanage, which is where all the state birth certificates are under civil statute law. Okay. Then what happens is they take that CISA number and they go to a wealth management company, and let's say it's just for round numbers, we're going to say it's $1 million worth of gold that's sitting in the national repository, and that $1 million is a portion to you in your account.
Hey,
That is the first investment.
you know
Okay.
what? If people go back and they do a research on this very topic, on what we just described with the CISA and with that financial instruments that are done, that goes all the way back to the 1400s on how kings and kingdoms actually um, generated wealth for their kingdom through their servants, their
Right.
peasants, the people.
Right. So here's what happens. So once that's done, right? So this apportioned amount, million, say it's $1 million, it goes to a wealth management company. That wealth management company, um, uh, I'm trying to think of who the big wealth manager, J.P. Morgan Chase, or I forgot some of the older ones that went belly up with the market. But anyways, these wealth management
There's
companies put it into a warehouse. They call it warehousing, and it gets an address, and that address is a CUSIP. Okay, that's where the CUSIP comes from. Now it becomes a CUSIP because it's addressed to a warehouse in a wealth management company, and they may have 10,000 of these things in one warehouse. Then what they do with that is they put it on a hedge fund or a multi-funded market, and they trade it. Okay. So it went from gold to a securitized gold account that's now in credits on the exchange market, and now they can trade it. Okay, so you're not actually trading the principal, you're trading the securitized credits of the principal and whatever interest or whatever gains it makes over time. And as they trade it over time, it builds up and builds up and builds up. Now, everyone thinks that these accounts are theirs. They're not yours, and you're not royalty, which means you got to have consideration. You did nothing to generate these. You gave no consideration. They're not yours. They are an insurance policy to protect the nation from going bankrupt. Should you go and drive down the road and hit a line of tractor trailers and cause $50 million in damage, it's insured to rebuild the bridges, replace the prop equity, replace the assets so that the mechanisms of commerce and trade can continue. Over time, when the way it's supposed to work is over time, when you perfect your identification and you perfect your social security number, and it becomes things like an SSSN.
You're
Did I
muted.
mute
You're not there.
myself?
Yeah.
Okay. Where did I stop at?
SSSN.
Okay, so I didn't stop far. SSSN. So you've now perfected your social security number to an SSSN. Now you're supposed to have civil liberty, and you can choose your trust administrator, taking it away from the state and giving it to somebody else. The problem is that the states are not putting death certificates on the original birth certificates when someone becomes perfected and they get a national birth certificate or they've changed jurisdictions. The states are hanging on to them and still exploiting them. That's the problem. You're not always supposed to stay in the state orphanage. When you go up and you get security clearances and you get all this stuff and you acquire all these things and you've got capacities and those capacities have expanded, the state no longer has jurisdiction over you. You have ascended. They're not letting you ascend. And that's what our problem is.
So from what I understand is that you're considered, that you didn't come and claim your identity after the age of 18. You're considered still lost at sea, and because you're still lost at sea, they're operating as the beneficiary.
No, you're not supposed to claim it. You're
No, they
supposed to
are
No, no.
operating.
No. Okay, so let me give you an example. Your TWIC card. You have a TWIC card, right?
Yep.
Okay, that is a travel card for Admiralty. That's an Admiralty card. Okay?
Correct.
You are not supposed to have you're not under state statute. You are held to a higher standard. They are supposed to dissolve or put to death your state birth certificate.
Yeah, but it's
That's the
not
problem.
because
It's
basically
not.
it was bonded and all those bonds basically are in my name.
No, it's not your name. They're not supposed to have authority over them. The files to be transferred to the proper administrator in the proper capacity because you have a TWIC card. You're not supposed to be prosecuted under civil law. You're not the public anymore. You're held to a higher standard. You got to go to a higher court. That's what they've stopped. You can't get out of the civil court system because they're not letting anyone out. So no matter how high you go, they can still drag you into their public civil court system and treat you as a member of the public. But you're not the public. That's what the problem is. They're not letting go when they no longer have jurisdiction over somebody.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yes, which is what we're trying to do is get if we can get the Alamo transferred back into the Department of Interior and get the Daughters of the Republic of Texas back in, we can get an administrative court, which is a common court, into the Alamo grounds where we can pass laws at common law to override this system of the things that they're blocking us with.
Yeah, from the creation of the straw man.
From the creation of, it's not the creation, it's the perpetual not letting it go.
Yeah,
If this person
I understand, but
is a private individual, they are no longer a member of the public. They are not 9 years old. They are not a ward of the state anymore.
yeah,
They
but you
left.
should have never been a ward of the state.
Well, that's
And
not
you should have.
true.
Well, no, because your parents gave you up at birth
Well, they
by
did
their
give
system.
you up,
Because
but
before then, there was no birth certificates.
well, it's not the birth certificate. It's who signed for it.
Yeah, but
The
how they
parents
do
are
it?
signing for it when the priest at their church is supposed to be signing for it, making the
Right, because I
child
have two.
in a common orphanage, in a common community. Or this is how the Amish do it. That's why
Yeah,
the
I have
bishop.
two birth certificates. I have my
Right.
church birth certificate, and then I have the creation of the straw man account, which
Well,
is
and
the
I have
only one that they
a
use.
birth certificate at the Office of Personnel Management, an SF-50 from the military, but they won't give it to me. They won't let me have it, and they won't give me a copy of it because that would make me an American national and no longer a member of the public.
Yeah.
So does every other veteran has one there. So when you're the problem is and we had these things 200 years ago. Our children were birthed at home. It was the church pastor was there and he signed the documents and recorded the record and put his seal on the Bible and on the family Bible and all that other stuff. There was a record. The problem is we have fallen away from those private, organized American religious establishment institutions to handle these matters. And when we default away from them, it defaults to the maritime corporate state side. If the pastor for the church is not signing the birth certificate, then the child has to become a ward of the state. That's how they look at it.
Yeah, but like I said, that wasn't that way before the corporatization of the United States.
Well, that's true. That's true because there was no real default system. It was only after they incorporated the United States that they moved it to a default system.
Because the only way that the corporate can interact with you is to make you a part of the corporation, because they can
Right,
only implement policies and procedures over employees or individuals that are within the corporate construct.
right.
Period.
But the problem is
The
you have
corporate,
to
I mean,
have.
the Supreme Court actually made that very known.
It's true. I agree with that. But what people don't understand is you have when if you ever deal with the Amish, whenever you try to deal with the Amish, they send you to their bishop. The reason they send you to their bishop is because everybody in that community, if they're going to deal with something with the government or the state or anybody else, you have to go to the bishop. Period. That is their intercessor to protect them from the state. So it becomes a religious matter. The only ones that have hung on to that doctrine is the Amish. They have set their systems up, and that's why their kids don't get kidnapped, and that's why they have their own private education system, their own private schools, and that's why they have these big beautiful farms and all this stuff because they are operating within that system.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
I
they
get
have
it.
a perimeter. They have a
Yeah,
religious perimeter, and they have officers in that religious perimeter that are in charge when it comes to that stuff. Period. So if the state has a problem, they got to go to the bishop to get to
right.
them. And I'm talking like go to the hospital stuff. Like they can't go to the hospital without calling the bishop
Yeah, because he's the mediator.
because he's the one that knows the games of the state. He knows the games that they play.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's see. How long does Robert think it will take to hear back about the petition he filed?
According to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights rules of procedure, it says that once they become aware, they will initiate the process, and it should take 21 days.
For a response, right?
Uh, yes, yes,
Of whatever. They just have to
Re-
respond within that period
right,
of time.
right.
Okay. Tanya's, hey, Captain Kelly Robert, do you see any reprieve on house rates or anything else lowering in price, or does it all have to wait for the crash? And if you have an idea, would that wait be 1, 5, 10, 20 years? Thank you all. Love you.
So is he talking about the price, the house pricing?
She says how home rates. Maybe she's talking about lending rates
So
or house
whenever the
prices. Not
financial
sure.
system changes, which we're expecting that to change relatively soon, um, once that happens, so as soon as this is why it was so important that they change out the um, guy at the Federal Reserve from Powell to the other guy and so on and so forth, because he's going to be implementing a lot of changes, radical changes, which we already know that the Federal Reserve is already under the Treasury Department. Those things have already happened, but they have to happen in the public domain so that the public can understand it, so on and so forth. But the guidelines for all of that, the interest rates and all that are basically going to be very low. And the situation is that once we get off of the fiat system, which is basically nothing more than a scam to fleece the wealth from a nation, from its people, because all it is a Ponzi scheme. So there's absolutely no reason in the world to ever have inflation. Inflation is a made up term specifically to hide how they devalue money by flooding money into a market with absolutely no securities to back it, meaning actual assets that are hard assets that do not change in value and cause it to deflate its buying power. And so as soon as we've done this, that's why basically it takes, so much more money to buy the same thing. Well, when that gets converted back to an actual gold standard, actual gold that is valued at what it should be, not its manipulated price way, way below its value, then you eliminate all of the manipulation within the monetary system, because that doesn't take a genius to understand. Once you've taken out the crazy manipulation that they've put into it intentionally to basically steal the value from every single person out there over time, it's just a
Right.
Ponzi scheme. And it's like robbing from Peter to pay Paul while they're skimming the rob the entire time, and then just continually getting someone else to fund it, someone else to fund it, skimming, paying out a little bit, and then continuous this process. And that's why they've always needed resets like wars and things like that to reset the financial load on it, because if not, it will
Yeah.
implode on itself. They never got it because we were changing it. And this was always going to happen, not necessarily by their means, but by what was actually being brought in by Trump and the military and the change of the guard and what happened, that this was all going to be instituted. And we knew it a long time ago, and it's just taken the process for it to get to where it's at right now. But once that changes over to sound money, the value of goods and services will have to adjust immediately based upon that. Because if not, people won't buy nothing. And what do I mean by that? All
Yeah.
right, right now, you say, all right, like my truck, it's $100,000 truck. Okay, really brand new. This truck is $125,000. There ain't nobody in the world that would buy this truck at $125,000 if all of a sudden the money goes back to being actually $100 is valued at $100. It's not valued at $100 right now. It's actually valued at like I think it's somewhere around $3 to $5 per hundred is its actual buying power. So you're not going to take something that is now valued at $100, meaning your actual money, and then purchase something that's being valued based off of having to spend, $3 to $5 value of what it's actually worth at that $100 value. So you're not going to spend 100 grand for it. You'll spend 35 or 40 for it. Period.
Right.
Because now you actually have value of that $100 of being actually $100. I'm not going to spend it on something that's valued using that $3 to $5 valuation per hundred. So the market will correct itself real fast once the money actually revalues itself. That's why they have told us that the money will go back to the prices back in the 50s, because that was the closest we had to actual valuation of $100 being $100. It was only a few
Right.
dollars off of its actual true value. So just think, a brand new house back in, 1950, 1955 was 10 grand.
30 grand.
Yeah.
10
Yeah,
grand.
10 grand. You could buy a brand new Corvette 1955 for $2,000.
Yeah.
So that same car today, not that car, but a brand new Corvette is $200,000. Based on the same kind of top of the
Right.
line Corvette, because that's what I meant by back in those days. It was top of the line car, wasn't like baseline anything. So um, you're not going to spend for buying a house, and this is why Trump was so adamant about not crashing the market and crashing the values, because people have got this $500,000 $700,000 investment in their home, and that home is really only valued at 100 grand, seventy-five thousand
Right.
dollars but that's your most valuable asset, and you're going into retirement or you're already in retirement, and how that will completely destroy you financially. This is being handled with very kid gloves so that people don't end up on the short end of the stick, that you have a you know over evaluated piece of property that you own, but now it's going to be valued at this, and you're supposedly owing a whole bunch of money that it's not valued at. And that's why that has to be corrected, that those were invalid contracts to begin with, because that money did not exist until you actually signed those papers.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's usury interest. You're creating money out of nothing. Then you're now paying interest back on money that did not exist. It's all illegal. The process is illegal. So this is what's having to be corrected back to sound money and actual real values and valuations of goods and services throughout the entirety of the industry. And energy is one of the main focal points for that, because everything is valued in energy. How much energy does it take to manufacture or bring something into existence? And people's labor is also considered energy. That's also a part of those evaluations. So all these things are being brought into consideration, and all things are being changed. And you're going to be overwhelmingly surprised in the outcomes when we finally get there. Just don't put the cart before the horse, and just know that the right people are in the right jobs doing the right things. And that's why he keeps telling you things like, Scott Bessent, the head of the Treasury, telling you about changing your deductions so you don't pay more taxes right now. That would be something that was, considered illegal by the IRS, because I did that for years, and they came after me for doing that. And I mean hardcore. I've talked to Kelly about it. They didn't play no games when I did that, because I didn't want to give them an interest free loan. Well, they came after me hardcore for that. But you've got the Secretary of the Treasury actually telling you to do that very thing. And you have President Donald Trump telling you that soon, basically, you're not going to end up paying taxes anyway. Just imagine not having to pay taxes anymore, or having money that is actually valued at what it's valued at, and prices being back to what they are supposed to be, versus this crazy inflated value of 100 times its value.
Well, I mean, the system's gone off the rails.
Yes.
You really should be paying taxes when you're operating in their system. But the problem is their system has infiltrated every other system, so there's no way out of their system.
Well, I don't mean
and
not
that's why
paying
we're getting a
taxes on,
reset.
like, goods and services. You buy something,
Right, right. That's
sales
their system.
tax. But
But
you
that's their
pay it
system.
one time. Not,
Right, but
I
that's
buy
their
a new
system.
truck. I pay the taxes on it. I sell that truck to somebody else. Why should they have to pay tax on something that's already been taxed? You shouldn't, and that's what's going away. That single taxed item won't be continually taxed and taxed and taxed and taxed. That's what Reagan said a long time ago, is those involuntary taxes that we pay about 75% in taxes, and you don't even know it.
Right. Right.
All right, Kelly, let's do last question.
Well, Captain, they're actually not directive for Robert, so I thought maybe we'd save them for when you and I did a Q&A.
Okay, that would be cool.
All right.
Okie doke. Well, Robert, great conversation as always.
As always.
Love it.
And I'll have my camera fixed by the next time we talk.
We'll see, Mr. Wall.
Yeah, or I'm going to call you the brick house.
Yeah.
The brick house. That's right.
Yeah.
I literally am an eclipse now.
Yeah, you are, aren't you? All right. Good night, everybody. And
right.
We'll talk to you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Robert. Thank you for joining us.